I'm Professor Marni Hughes Warrington. I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. Whether you work here at ANU, you're part of our community, or you're visiting the campus, we're delighted that you're with us for this very special occasion. We always open our occasions by acknowledging the country upon which we stand, and I do so now, that this is the land of the Ngunnawal people who have met on this place for tens of thousands of years. It's amazing to think that for tens of thousands of years, Indigenous people have not only come from the local area but across the country to meet and to exchange ideas, and their unbroken threads of learning make the most perfect place for a university to have been founded. So I acknowledge that tradition. I acknowledge the elders of the Ngunnawal people, past, present and emerging, and I welcome anybody in the audience who is Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. This is a very, very special occasion for me. I was delighted when I received the invitation from Professor Jar to come today, and I needed no encouragement when I saw the topic. Being philosopher but part historian as well, I actually had to profess incredible interest. So I want to welcome you formally to the 2017 K R Narayanan Oration, the 19th in the series, organised by the Australia South Asia Research Centre here at the ANU. Now, this oration honours the late President of India, who helped to establish the centre in 1994. He was amongst the most accomplished Indian diplomats. He obtained his PhD from the London School of Economics, and he served in various diplomatic roles in addition to Vice President and then finally President of India. Our speaker today, most revered speaker, is Admiral R K Dhowan, retired PVSM, AVSM, YSM. I would wish to have such post-nominals next to my name, who you'll also notice today has come unbelievably beautifully attired, wearing naval signals both on his tie and his pocket square, and I feel tremendously underdressed by comparison. He is immediate past Chief of the Indian Navy and currently Chairman of the National Maritime Foundation for India. Just out there, he was telling us about a book he released about 3 months ago, 1,500 pages, documentary history of the last 5,000 years of maritime interactions with India. This is an incredibly formidable project to have undertaken, because I have some friends that have worked on manifests, that have worked on insurance, but to have undertaken such a comprehensive review is, I think, a superhuman task to have been achieved. He also told me at the launch that there were ships assembled, that there were planes that flew overhead, and unfortunately we have none of those things today. So on a much more low-key occasion, we're incredibly delighted to welcome him, speaking on the topic, India, a resurgent maritime nation harnessing the blue economy. So we just welcome him, and then I'm going to introduce the High Commissioner. So if you can just join me in welcoming him. Welcome, Admiral. I'd also like to welcome and acknowledge the High Commissioner of India, His Excellency Dr. A.M. Goddatne and Mrs. Goddatne. The High Commissioner commenced in December last year. And I want to acknowledge the presence of members of Canberra's diplomatic community, as well as DFAT and other government agencies, and the continuing generous financial contribution of the Australia-India Council, DFAT, to this oration. It's a particular privilege working at ANU, knowing that the boundaries between us, the diplomatic community, and the public service are quite porous, and we celebrate that, and we acknowledge the time that you've given up to be here, and we thank you for joining us. Now, I believe the President of India, His Excellency Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, sends his respects and best wishes to all of us on this occasion, and I'm going to invite the High Commissioner to come forward and read his message now. So if I can ask you, High Commissioner, to join us, thank you very much. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Madam. I'll read the message of the President of India on this very special occasion. I'm happy to know that the Australia South Asia Research Centre at the Australian National University is organising the 19th K R Narayanan Oration on India, a resurgent maritime national harnessing blue economy by Admiral R K Dhowan, retired, currently Chairman, National Maritime Foundation, on this day. India is a major maritime nation. The Indian seaboard has been the centre of intense maritime activity over several centuries. India has been cooperating with other maritime nations in the sustainable utilization of ocean resources and providing security. Recent Indian initiatives in this area include the International Fleet Review in February 2016 in Visakhapatnam, where the Prime Minister outlined India's policy of the development of the Indian Ocean through Saga or Ocean, which is also an acronym for Security and Growth for All in the region. The concept of blue economy is emerging as the new paradigm and aims at sustainable development of the oceans. The importance of this blue economy is underscored by the fact that in 2014, international trade accounted for nearly 50% of India's GDP, with 90% of this trade by volume and 72% by value dependent on ocean transport. The President wishes the event all success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, to have such a finely wrought message and one that understands the significance of the topic. And it's my great pleasure to invite Admiral Dhowan to come forward and deliver the oration this year. Please make him welcome again.
Professor Marni, Hughes, Warrington, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Australian National University, His Excellency Dr. Gandane, the High Commissioner of India, Professor Jha, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a distinct honor and a proud privilege for me to be present here today at the Australian National University to deliver the KR Narayanan Oration for 2017 and have the opportunity to interact with such an august audience. President KR Narayanan, the 10th President of India, was born on 27th of October 1920 in the coastal state of Kerala. He was a distinguished diplomat, an erudite scholar, and a capable leader with a maritime vision. As the President of India, he had the unique distinction to review the first International Fleet Review at Mumbai in 2001. And speaking on the occasion where nearly 29 navies of the world were present, he mentioned that the nation's prosperity as well as its independence depends on the security of the seas. He also mentioned that the International Fleet Review was a magnificent demonstration by navies to strengthen bridges of friendship across countries of the world. The subject of my talk today is also related to the seas and the oceans, and I will be speaking on India, a resurgent maritime nation, harnessing the blue economy. The seas and the oceans have enthused all of us who have donned the white uniform. But I'm sure that it will be of equal interest to all others as well, because we are all tied and connected to the oceans. And I would like all of you to reflect on an interesting biological fact, that we have in our veins the same percentage of salt in our blood, which is the same percentage of salt in the oceans. And this is true not only about the salt in our blood, but also the salt in our sweat and in our tears. Therefore, we are all tied and connected to the oceans, and whenever we go back to the seas, whether to sail on them or merely watch them, we get the feeling of going back where we came from. This truly defines the relationship of humankind with the oceans, and perhaps also the reason why talking about the seas brings out such passion in us. Our blue planet, the Earth, has a dominance of the maritime domain, with over 70% of the Earth's surface covered by water, nearly 80% of the world's population living within 200 nautical miles of the coast, and 90% of the world's trade transiting by sea. India is essentially a maritime nation, and the Indian seaboard has been the vortex of intense maritime activity over centuries. The Indus Valley civilization, which existed in the western part of the country, dates back to 3300 BC Even today, we have a dry dock at Lothal in Gujarat in the western part of the country, which dates back to 2200 BC. And it is from these small ports that ancient seafarers sailed off to distant lands in Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and east coast of Africa to establish trade and cultural links. On the east coast of India and in the southern part of the country, we had the seafaring kingdoms of the Kalingas, the Cholas, the Pandyas and Cheras, who sailed off to Southeast Asian countries. And even today, we can see glimpses of India's glorious heritage in these countries. India lost the supremacy of the waters around it with the arrival of the European powers. And the first to arrive were the Portuguese when Vasco da Gama landed on the shores of Calicut in the western part of the country on 20th of May 1498. The Portuguese were followed by the Dutch, the British and the French. The British period was also a period of glorious shipbuilding period in India. When the Britishers arrived, they found a unique combination of the Malabar teak wood of the west coast of India and the shipbuilders of Gujarat. And with this combination, they started building ships at Bombay docks. Commencing 1753, for the next 100 years, nearly 115 war vessels, including 84 gunships for the Royal Navy, were built there. 144 merchant ships were built there, which is today the location of the naval dockyard at Mumbai. Some of the most famous warships in the world were built during that period. The national anthem of United States of America, the Star-Spangled Banner, was written by Francis Key in Baltimore on board a ship, HMS Minden. And that ship, HMS Minden, ladies and gentlemen, was built in Bombay docks. The Treaty of Nankin ceding Hong Kong to the British was signed on board another famous warship, HMS Cornwallis, also built in Bombay docks. One of the oldest warships afloat in the world today is HMS Trincomalee, which is berthed in Hartlepool on the east coast of UK, which was built in Bombay docks 200 years ago in 1817. Regrettably, when the transition took place from steel, well, let's say wood to steel and sail to steam, we got left behind because India was not part of the Industrial Revolution. And the revival of our maritime capabilities took place in the latter part of the 20th century after independence. Oceans are central to life on Earth. They are rich in oil and mineral resources. They are the suppliers of oxygen, absorbers of carbon dioxide, a virtual heat sink, rich in biodiversity, and have emerged as the global economic highways for transit of trade. With depletion of resources on land, humankind has turned towards the seas for resources. And there is a misperception that the oceans are an unending resource base and an infinite sink. Nothing could be further away from reality. And in the last few decades, we have seen pollution of the oceans and contamination of the natural marine habitat with an adverse impact of climate change on the oceans. Therefore, we need to look at this particular aspect because studies have indicated that nearly 80% of all pollutants in the oceans emanate from land. And if we continue with the same rate of pollution, in a few decades from now, we will have more plastic in the ocean than fish. Harnessing the blue economy is therefore emerging as a new paradigm which looks at the oceans as the common heritage of mankind and calls for optimal utilization of the resources with minimum impact on the environment and ensuring sustained development of the oceans. India, like Australia, has a unique maritime disposition with a natural outflow towards the seas, and the country sits astride busy sea lines of communication which transit across the Indian Ocean. Nearly 100,000 ships pass over these waters every year. We have a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers, an exclusive economic zone of over 2 million square kilometers, over 1,300 islands and islets, which include part of the Andaman and Nicobar Group in the Bay of Bengal and the Lakshadweep Group in the Arabian Sea and islands off the west and east coast of India. Our coastal regions are very important because nearly 20% of our population lives along the coast, and our coastal regions account for nearly 60% of the country's GDP. Over 90% of our trade by volume and 72% by value transits by sea, and our foreign trade accounts for nearly 50% of the country's GDP. It is evident, therefore, that we have vast maritime interests which are also enablers of our blue economy. And I would like to highlight some of the maritime sectors which are likely to see phenomenal growth in the coming years, and these also becomes the avenue of cooperation between India and Australia to harness the blue economy. India has 12 major ports and over 200 minor and intermediate ports. These ports, where the handling capacity was in the region of 1,054 million metric tons per annum till a few years ago, has increased to 1,400 million metric tons per annum today, and is likely to increase to 2,500 million metric tons per annum over the next 10 years. The government has launched an ambitious Sagarmala project, which is a port-led initiative based on 4 pillars of port modernization, connectivity, port-led industrialization, and coastal community development. This will look into aspects of connecting the major and minor ports with the hinterland, and also development of areas such as coastal shipping and inland waterways. Currently, 94% of freight in India moves by road or rail. As we are all aware, movement of and transportation by water is safer, cheaper, and cleaner, and therefore we are going to have a large number of inland waterways coming up. The country has about 14,500 kilometers of navigable inland waterways, of which 4,500 kilometers are being developed in the first phase as 5 major national waterways. The National Waterway 1 will actually connect up the port of Haldia in the eastern part of the country to Allahabad in Uttar Pradesh across the Ganges River. National Waterway 2 will be across the Brahmaputra River in the northeastern part of the country. National Waterway 3 on the west coast of India in the coastal state of Kerala. National Waterway 4 in the coastal states of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh on the east coast of India, and National Waterway 5 in the coastal state of Orissa. The work on National Waterway 1 has already commenced with an investment about 170 million US dollars for looking into aspects related for the development of riverine terminals, the jetties, as well as the navigation systems. This will improve the inland waterways, and the whole Sagarmala project actually is a combination of about 150 projects with an investment of about 60 to 70 billion US dollars. The next aspect is related to mercantile marine or shipping. India currently has 1,174 Indian flag ships, totaling to about 22 million gross registered tons. This number is likely to increase because currently, though 90% of our trade moves by sea, only 10% is carried in Indian hulls or in Indian bottoms. This figure stood at 80% in the 80s, and has come to 10%, and the government has taken on initiatives to provide incentives to the shipping industry to increase the number of the Indian registered and Indian controlled shipping. Because 80% of our oil is imported, which comes primarily by sea. And also 40% of our gas and LNG requirements are imported, which requires LNG carriers. So the government is giving a boost to the shipbuilding industry in India, which is a vibrant industry with 27 shipyards. And the incentives are in the form of tax reforms, providing the infrastructure status to the shipbuilding industry, setting up design centers, induction of technology, and also the government has given the approval for 100% foreign direct investment in the shipbuilding industry. This will ensure that the shipbuilding, ship repair, and the ship recycling industry will be revived, and the total shipbuilding capacity in terms of the global capacity will increase in India. One area which I would like to touch upon is the warship building industry in India. Soon after independence, we revived the warship building industry, and we inducted naval architects into the Navy way back in 1955. India constructed its first indigenous naval warship, a patrol vessel, INS Ajay, at Garden Reach in the shipyard at Kolkata in 1961. We set up our Naval Design Directorate in 1964. Over the last 50 years, the naval designers have designed, and our own shipyards have built ships for the Indian Navy. Today, it's a matter of great pride that all the 46 ships and submarines under construction for the Indian Navy are being built in Indian shipyards, both public and private. Not a single ship is on order on any foreign yard. This has led to the transformation from a buyer's navy to a builder's navy. And the future of the Indian Navy has been firmly anchored on self-reliance and indigenization. And it is our endeavor to ensure that future warships and submarines are 100% made in India. India also has a thriving fishing industry. We have 250,000 fishing boats, over 4 million active fishermen, 14 million part of the fishing community, and our annual catch is in the region of 9.5 million tons, which is about 5% of the world's annual catch. And we earn about $5.5 billion US dollars as foreign exchange on account of exports of fishery products. But this is only scratching the surface, because 85 to 90% of fishing in Indian waters is coastal in nature and limited largely to about 20 nautical miles, whereas we have the entire 200 nautical miles of the EZ to be exploited. There is hardly any fishing in deep Indian waters, and it is said that fish in deep Indian waters are actually dying of old age. This actually provides a huge opportunity of fishing in deep waters, and the government is providing incentive to fishermen to buy deep sea fishing trawlers by giving them soft loans. And once this picks up, these deep sea trawlers will be made in our own shipyards and boatyards, hundreds and thousands of them across the country, and provide livelihood to the fishermen and earn us valuable foreign exchange by export of our fishery products, by setting up processing platforms and refrigeration plants. So this is another area for cooperation with our other friendly countries. Our exclusive economic zone is rich in oil and mineral resources, and we have gas and oil exploration areas both off the west and east coast of India. India has about 6.9 billion tons of oil reserves and about 3.98 billion cubic meters of gas reserves. This is an area which will see growth in the coming years by public-private partnerships, cooperation with other countries, induction of technologies, and drilling in deeper waters. India was allocated an area of 150,000 square kilometers in central Indian Ocean for deep seabed mining way back in 1987. We were later given the pioneer status for deep seabed mining. The first phase of survey and mapping has been completed, and now we are in the exploration phase. And here there is a great opportunity for interaction and cooperation for deep seabed mining area as well. There is a comprehensive plan of the government to develop our islands, and this comprehensive plan takes into account aspects of security, the economic sustenance, the social and the cultural sustenance, and with a very key and keen eye on the environment. These islands will be developed for controlled ecotourism and as smart cities to ensure that these projects are greenfield projects with a zero carbon footprint. There will also be a boost to the cruise tourism and the marine tourism industry. We have about 190 lighthouses, and some of them in the most picturesque locations in the islands, which are also being developed as part of the marine and cruise tourism scenario. We intend developing marinas along our coast and in the islands and give a fillip to the leisure sailing industry. We are also looking at promoting yachting as a major sport, where we have identified talent in our coastal areas and young boys and girls as part of schools and colleges and as part of the National Cadet Corps. They are being provided equipment, training, so that they can be part of the competitive yachting and sailing areas. 7% of the world's seafarers are Indians in the merchant navy, and this is a huge number. India has about 150 institutions which train these people. This is a number which is likely to grow in coming years, and we will need larger number of institutions, and there is a great opportunity for skill development in the maritime sector, where we can cooperate with countries like Australia, which have some very fine institutions for training in the maritime domain. We also have to look at aspects related to renewable sources of energy. India is the 5th largest market for wind energy in the world, but now the focus is shifting to renewable energy from the seas, and we are looking at the tidal energy, the wave energy, and the ocean thermal energy conversion. The depths in our waters of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands falls very steeply. The temperature on the surface in these waters is about 24-25 degrees centigrade, and the temperature of the water at about 1,000 meters is 4 to 5 degrees centigrade. So when you pump out water from those levels, the differential temperature of 20 degrees centigrade is used to evaporate ammonia, run turbines, and generate power. We have a pilot project in the islands in collaboration, and OTEC is going to be another form of renewable energy from the oceans. As you can see, there are going to be huge infrastructure investments, but the challenge is going to be that all these have to be greenfield projects with a very keen eye on the environment to ensure sustained development of the oceans. The Indian Ocean itself is the 3rd largest water body, spanning an area of 68.5 million square kilometers. The ocean is rich in oil and mineral resources, and 66% of the world's oil, 50% of the world's container traffic, 33% of the world's cargo traffic passes over the waters of the Indian Ocean. Globalization has resulted in the vulnerability of the oceans and the seas are no longer a benign medium. The threats and challenges on the waters of the Indian Ocean are as wide and varied as they come. Who could have imagined that in the 21st century we would once again be grappling with pirates, or that the major threat in the maritime domain would be from asymmetric warfare and maritime terrorism? But that is a reality today, And the other challenges include arms trafficking, drug smuggling, human trafficking, and poaching. Another major challenge in the Indian Ocean region is the natural disasters, because nearly 70% of all extreme climate events convert themselves into a humanitarian disasters, and the navies and the coast guards have to be ready to take on that challenge as well. The situation on land in the Indian Ocean region has instabilities, tensions, turbulence, and these have the potential to flow into the maritime domain. And consequently, nearly 120 warships from over 20 nations are always present in the Indian Ocean region to safeguard their maritime interests. India has vast maritime interests, and the responsibility of protecting these interests falls squarely on the shoulders of men in white uniform, because it is the responsibility of the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard to ensure that our maritime interests, which have a vital relationship with the nation's economic growth, are allowed to develop unhindered at all times. The Indian Navy has emerged as a multi-dimensional network force which is ready to take on any challenge in the Indian Ocean and beyond. It ensures maritime security for national prosperity and carries out its tasks and missions under 4 basic roles: the military role, the constabulary role, the benign and diplomatic role. Under the military role, we ensure the growth of the Indian Navy in accordance with our Maritime Capability Perspective Plan. It is centered around the Carrier Task Force for Sea Control and submarines for sea denials, and the Indian Navy regularly carries out exercises to hone the professional skills and to enhance its capabilities. Under the constabulary role, we ensure the safety and security of our coastal areas and our exclusive economic zone in coordination with the Coast Guard and other agencies that operate in the maritime domain. In recent years, we have leveraged technology to set up coastal radar stations, automatic identification system stations, and a national command, control, communication, and information network to enhance the maritime domain awareness in our waters. Ships of the Indian Navy have been regularly deployed in the Gulf of Aden since 2008 for anti-piracy patrols. Currently, our 63rd ship is on patrol, and we have safely escorted over 3,750 ships of all nationalities. And in coordination with other navies of the world, we have managed to bring piracy under some control. The Indian Navy also deploys its assets in the exclusive economic zones of Maldives, Seychelles, and Mauritius, and carries out EEZD patrol in coordination with the maritime agencies of these countries. We carry out coordinated patrols in the Bay of Bengal with the navies of Myanmar, Indonesia, and Thailand. Under the benign role, we provide humanitarian assistance and disaster relief in the aftermath of events such as the tsunami, as well as super cyclone, and provide relief not only to people in our own coastal areas, but to our littoral neighbors as well. In response to contingencies, when Yemen was in turmoil in 2015, the ships of the Indian Navy were deployed to evacuate Indian nationals and nationals from over 30 countries. This exemplifies the unique brotherhood of the seas and the ability of the navies to promote cooperation. Under the diplomatic role, the Indian Navy has expanded its operational footprint as far east as Vladivostok, as far west as the Atlantic, and as far south as Australia. We regularly carry out exercises with various countries of the world and navies of the world, including United States, Singapore, and the Royal Australian Navy. We have staff talks with over 20 countries, including Australia, and the aim is to shape a favorable maritime environment by capacity building and capability enhancement, and also by information exchange to enhance the maritime domain awareness in our waters. We look at the other aspects related to cooperation, where in 2008 the Indian Navy took a unique initiative and established the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, or IONS. Today, IONS has 22 members and 4 observers, and in my view, it provides an effective template for maritime cooperation in the region. We also have the Indian Ocean Rim Association, which is another construct to manage the maritime affairs and look into aspects of maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. 20 members of the IORA have their navies as part of the IONS, and in recent years there has been synergy between the IONS and the IORA. Australia has been the chair both of IONS and IORA and has provided significant contribution towards maritime cooperation. To further promote cooperation between navies of the world, the Indian Navy conducted the International Fleet Review at Visakhapatnam in February last year, where 50 navies of the world came together to strengthen bridges of friendship. We had about 100 ships at the Naval Review anchorage, and it was my privilege to be the Chief of the Naval Staff for that occasion. We had 24 chiefs of navies, including my dear friend Admiral Tim Barrett from the Royal Australian Navy, where we had the opportunities among the chiefs and officers and sailors to discuss at a seminar to partner together for a secure maritime future. The theme of the conference, and as well as the International Fleet Review, was that we may be separated by geography, but we are certainly united through oceans. Speaking at the International Fleet Review, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, reiterated his vision for the Indian Ocean as Saga, which means the ocean and stands for security and growth for all in the region. Later at the Maritime Summit in April last year at Mumbai, he articulated his maritime vision. As you can see, in the past few years, India has taken great strides in the maritime domain, and it actually appears as if India has once again turned towards the seas and is destined to emerge as a resurgent maritime nation. In conclusion, the seas around us are gaining newfound importance as each day goes by because of their linkages with the blue economy. And I have no doubt that the current century is the century of the seas. The Indian Ocean has emerged as the world's center of gravity in the maritime domain. Another unique feature of the Indian Ocean is that 80% of the oil and trade that emanates in the Indian Ocean region is extra-regional in nature. This implies that if there is any impediment to the free flow of oil or trade, it would have a detrimental impact, not just on the economies of the region, but the global economies as well. Safety, security, and stability on the waters of the Indian Ocean is therefore of paramount importance, because it is the collective responsibility of the navies to ensure the safety of the global commons. Networking between navies and global maritime partnerships are therefore emerging as the new order of the current century. The Indian Navy and the Australian Navy have had a cooperation mechanism for decades. In the recent years, there has been an increase in this cooperation in the field of ship visits, training interactions, exercises, and information exchange to enhance the maritime domain awareness. In the coming years, these avenues of cooperation are bound to increase, which will further strengthen the bonds of friendship between the Indian Navy and the Royal Australian Navy. India and Australia are two great maritime nations who have extended their hand across the Indian Ocean to promote maritime cooperation. Harnessing the blue economy provides us a tremendous opportunity to partner together. And I would like to term this as a partnership for prosperity. And I'm sure that this will open up many avenues of cooperation between our two great nations and ensure greater maritime cooperation as well as sustained development of the oceans. Thank you very much.
Well, we have some short time for questions, Admiral, if you will tolerate you're very welcome to take a seat. That was a most accomplished lecture. Thank you very much. I was thinking all the way through it, we use the phrase blue sky thinker all the time, and I keep wondering why we don't use the phrase blue sea thinker for somebody who has such a clear vision of what the opportunity is but understands where the currents of the ideas are travelling. And I think 1,500 pages of document review gives you an incredible insight to how all the pieces come together. So thank you for doing that, and I hope you will take some questions if that's okay. So we do have probably 5-10 minutes over there.
The Chinese have announced their New Silk Road initiative, which implies a greater presence in the Indian Ocean. What implications are there for the Indian Navy with this?
Is your question, what is the view of the Indian Navy?
What are the implications? Are there any?
Well, as far as the Indian Navy and the Indian Maritime Cooperation is concerned, we have looked into aspects related to cooperating with all our littoral neighbors and other countries in the Indian Ocean region. As I outlined, we have cooperation mechanisms both on the maritime side as well as the naval side with the island nations, with our immediate neighbors in the Bay of Bengal, whereas you know we have 7 countries on the rim of the Bay of Bengal, which is the largest bay in the world, from Sri Lanka to Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and various countries in Southeast Asia and in the West Gulf countries in the east coast of Africa. So we do continue with our cooperation. As far as the aspect related to the views of the Indian government on the One Belt, One Road initiative is that we have a view with regard to the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which passes to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is the part of India, and it passes through Gilgit and Baltistan. So that is the view, but otherwise we continue to cooperate with all the countries of the region, and we consider that trade flow, as I said, is part of the global commons. The Indian Navy also interacts and engages the Chinese and the PLA Navy. We cooperate with them in the Gulf of Aden as part of the anti-piracy patrol. We cooperate with them in terms of our ship visits. We had 2 of their ships as part of the International Fleet Review. We also had our ship visits to the PLA Navy. So the aim is to engage and cooperate with the navies and the maritime nations in the Indian Ocean region.
Yeah, question down here at the front.
Yeah, I know. Would you mind speaking?
If you could just hold a minute.
Hi. Would you be able to speak on some of the specific blue economy opportunities in the northern Andaman Islands and the future challenges across the Myanmar-India maritime border, as well as the challenges in developing and securing that area?
As I mentioned, we have the Bay of Bengal, which is the largest bay in the world, and we have our maritime neighbors ranging from Sri Lanka in the south. We have Bangladesh, Myanmar, as you mentioned, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we have islands of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These islands are being developed. As far as the security is concerned, we have a tri-service command, which is based in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which has components of the Indian Navy, Indian Air Force, and the Indian Army to look after aspects of security. Because the Andaman and Nicobar Islands overlook the busy Malacca Straits, over which nearly 60,000 trips transit every year. We have cooperation mechanisms in terms of providing support to our littoral neighbors, which also includes Myanmar. We have regular interaction with the Myanmar Navy. And we also look into aspects, as I mentioned, of patrols which are carried out in these waters. So there will be development of the islands, but the development is based on the aspects of the Blue Economy initiatives, where we will look at the sustained development of the islands. We will also have a look at the aspect related to ensure that we ensure zero carbon footprint in some of the greenfield projects which are developed, and we will continue to engage and cooperate with the countries in the region, such as Myanmar as well. We are providing them assistance in setting up of some ports and harbors as well.
Up back there in the red jacket. You just wait for the microphone.
Admiral, one of the questions that has that's been going on is China has been growing a lot of artificial islands around the region, and it's been investing a lot in the coastal areas around the world. And just wanted to ask the first question: is China investing a lot in the Indian coastal cities and the industries? And the other strategic question is that how is the Indian Navy coping with the growing influence of China in terms of artificial island building and ways how it's keeping its keeping its maritime area safe?
The primary area of interest of the Indian Navy is the Indian Ocean region. And as I mentioned, we carry out all activities to carry out surveillance in our waters and ensure that our waters are safe and secure, including protecting our maritime interests, which is a lot of trade which passes through the Indian Ocean. And our own trade, 90% of which transits by sea. The development, as you know, and as you mentioned, of islands which is taking place by China is in South China Sea. And this is more for China to contend with its littoral neighbors in the South China Sea. And as far as the threat perception in the Indian Ocean is concerned, the PLA Navy regularly deploys in the Indian Ocean region for anti-piracy escort force. We've had actually ships as part of the APEF since 2008, where regularly the APF has been deployed. We've had deployments of their submarines as well. So the Indian Navy monitors the movements of all the events and activities by various navies, including the PLA Navy, in the waters around India at all times.
We have time for one more question.
What are India's plans after the Chabahar port in Iran is fully functional?
Well, it is part of our plans to provide capacity building and capability enhancement to our littoral neighbors. And the Chabahar port development will ensure greater movement of trade in that particular region. And this is a port initiative that the government of India has taken as part of an assistance, as part of the capacity building for Iran.
We have time for one more. There was such a succinct answer. One more over there. I'm going to ask the microphone. I'll go all the way over to the other side.
Thank you, Admiral, for your talk. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about specifically the Malabar exercise and the future of that, especially with Australia not participating this year, and whether there's a probability in the future of Australian participation and cooperation in that field. Thank you.
Malabar exercises are part of our bilateral exercises with the United States, which started off way back in 1992. And we've had Malabar exercises as multilateral exercise in the past, and then the government's view at this point in time that it's largely a bilateral exercise between India and the USA, and this is conducted periodically in off Okinawa at times or in the Indian waters. This has grown in scope and content, and is one of the major exercises carried out by the Indian Navy. We've had the participation of Japan in this exercise, and as far as the participation of Australia is concerned, it is on a case-to-case basis, and the current view of the government is for non-participation as it was. But as you know, Australia has participated in the Malabar exercises when it was part of the multilateral construct in 2007. So it is an aspect which gets considered from time to time. With Australia, we have a very vibrant OS index, which is going to be increased in scope and content between the two navies, and the future may see participation of Australia and India in a multilateral exercise as well.
We're out of time for questions. I'm going to call upon just a moment Professor Jar to do the formal vote of thanks. I just want to note that you, unfortunately, Admiral, you've set such a high benchmark for punctuality of delivery of lecture and succinctness in answers that I fear all of our lecturers in the university will now be, I think, trembling in fear if they have to follow after you. Before we call up Professor Jar, I believe that you have, this is
I have a small little souvenir
wow.
for you, and I like to term this as direction and time.
Well, well, for a philosopher, I'm incredibly honoured by this gift. Please join me in thanking for these incredibly generous. Thank you very much. If you would stay, most honoured Admiral, for Professor Jar, as I believe you're going to now hop up and provide a formal vote of thanks. Thank you, Professor Jar.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have one more round of robust applause for the inimitable Admiral Dhowan? Thank you all for coming to the 2017 Narayanan Oration, the 19th in the series. This lecture will soon be printed and copies will be available with the Australia South Asia Research Centre, ASARC. The lecture will also be available for free download from the ASARC website, and of course it is being live streamed and being watched in various parts of the world as we speak. At this time, it is my pleasant duty to bring this oration to a close by thanking the people and organizations who have contributed to making this oration such a success. This oration is named after the now deceased Dr. K R Narayanan, former President of India. Dr. Narayanan inaugurated ASARC in 1994 and continued his support to ASARC throughout his life. Professor Hughes Warrington mentioned a little bit about Dr. Narayanan's illustrious career. I may add a little bit to that. Dr. Narayanan, during his one of his many diplomatic duties was being posted to Australia. He was posted in Australia for a while. I don't know in what capacity, but the President's website, the Indian President's website, has that information. And he also received an honorary doctorate from the ANU quite a long time ago, and of course from several other universities as well. Following from President Narayanan, President APJ Abdul Kalam, President Srimati Pratibha Patil, and the current President Pranab Mukherjee have continued their support to the oration series and their association with the ANU. We would like to welcome the new Indian High Commissioner, His Excellency Dr. A.M. Gondane, to the ANU and to the oration. We would also like to extend a warm welcome to several members of the diplomatic community in Canberra and senior public servants from the Commonwealth Government of Australia, the Indian High Commission, as well as a number of distinguished guests from the Australia-India Council, the ANU, including our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Marni Hughes Warrington, and members of the wider Canberra community. All of you have made this oration so special. Our heartfelt thanks to our speaker today, Admiral R K Dhowan. Admiral Dhowan has had a brilliant career in the Indian Navy, culminating in his appointment as the 22nd Chief of the Navy. Currently, he is chairman of the National Maritime Foundation, an organization at the cutting edge of policy research into India's blue economy. We are honored and privileged that he accepted our invitation to deliver the 2017 oration. I do not have adequate words to thank you, Admiral Dhowan. It is truly a privilege to have you with us. We wish you all the very best in all spheres of life. I would request you to stay in touch with ASARC in the future. ASARC's list of Narayanan speakers reads like a who's who of important Indian public figures, and Admiral Dhowan is a stellar addition to this list. The Narayanan Oration now ranks among the very best India lecture series anywhere in the world. Compare it to Harvard, compare it to Oxford, anywhere you want. The Narayanan Oration is right up there. This oration is a lasting contribution of ASARC and the Arndt-Corden Department of Economics to strengthening India-Australia relations, which is so vital for peace and prosperity in our region. Now I would like to thank the organizations and people who have made this oration such a success. The 2017 KR Narayanan Oration received grant funding from the Australia-India Council of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, for which we are very grateful. At DFAT, Madeline Chimura, right here, Marita Ford, and a number of others, and the Office of the Australian High Commissioner in Delhi provided invaluable logistical support for organizing this oration. At the Indian High Commission, the High Commissioner, Dr. Gondani, and his staff, particularly Mr. Sonal Bajaj, provided critical support throughout. At the ANU, Sandy Hawk helped out with the organization of this event. In my own department, the Arndt-Corden Department of Economics, our administrators, Hyok Kyung and Sandra Zek, and a host of very dedicated and dear students of ours have worked tirelessly to ensure that the event was a success. So thank you all very much. Thank you.